Hello, trying to be positive. This week, we just recorded a fertility story with one of my patients, but also one of my very good and long-term friends. So the dynamic between the two of us is very interesting. It's like she's my little sister and I am her very annoying, overly opinionated older sister / acupuncturist / negative influence in her life. This is coming out after she's given birth. So this is coming to you from the past. Whoa. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. As always, pretty pleased with a cherry on top. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Every time we get a new subscriber, I do a little dance, little cheer, because it means that the more people are subscribing, the more we can engage guests that have more to say. Not that the ones that we have had don't have a lot to say, but it just increases our reach and increases the number of people who are willing and wanting to speak to us. So the more I can get on in terms of guest quantity, the more information we can share. And that's what this is all about. Sharing is caring. So once you look like you are no longer having an aneurysm, we will start.
So in another 20 minutes.
Somebody call the ambulance. I know I think the audience should know that you're nervous to tell your story.
Gosh,
because
spilling the beans, Anne.
You're a perfectionist, which is the theme throughout this story.
It's very true. Yes.
You know, they always say, like, one of the most annoying things that people tell you when you're going through a hard time is there's a lesson in this.
I think you did tell me that maybe a few times. And I was maybe annoyed.
I was that annoying person. Yes. And so I'm going to tell you now. There was a lesson in this, and your perfectionism has been potentially fixed. Less so?
I don't know about fixed.
By your tiny, soon-to-be son?
Yeah. He's taught me a lot about perfectionism and that it's just not going to happen. So you can't control these things. So
nothing happened the way that you thought it was going to.
Pretty much nothing.
Right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go. Things started off with a bang.
Let's start there.
Should we start there?
Yeah.
And I realized that they literally started off with a bang, which we thought was, maybe a good thing. But then it went to another bang, which was the ectopic pregnancy. So that was sort of the beginning.
Yeah. It was
rough. Start there.
Let's start with your ectopic pregnancy.
Okay.
You've now given away that climactic moment.
I know, sorry.
That's
I guess
okay.
I could have gotten to that. I could have led up to that, but
our audience might be like the people who can only watch and rewatch things that they know are going to end in a certain way.
I'm just preparing for the perfectionist.
You were. Thank you.
Who needed to know. Yeah, so Journey actually really started when I came to you after we got married, and I was like, Cam, I'm ready to have a baby. And you were maybe more excited than I was. I was excited, but you may have been slightly more excited than I was.
I've been waiting for years.
She literally said that. I've been waiting for years. Yeah, so you gave me a bunch of supplements. You taught me about ovulation, which I realized I knew zero about. And you put me on the strips, the pre-moms, which I'm sure many people know about.
Started stripping.
Got the app, learned all about that. And shortly after actually was, we did get pregnant. What's interesting though, is that I knew from the get-go with this pregnancy, I don't know if you remember, I didn't get excited about it from the get-go because I knew something was off. I had taken a pregnancy test at first. It was negative. It was maybe a week later. I sort of felt a little bit off. I was spotting. And took another test and it was positive. And it was the weirdest thing because you'd think, oh, positive pregnancy test and what we wanted. But I was like, nope, nope, something's wrong. Something's up.
Yeah, remember you had you actually sent me a picture of this clot that was in the shower.
God, I'm so sorry. But
I didn't know. I was like, that's not great.
You're like, that's not normal.
And we actually, I like how I'm putting we went to your family doctor.
Oh yeah, you were obviously the consultant the whole time.
And we said, this is somewhat concerning, no?
Yeah, so went to family doctor. She was like, well, yeah, like that's maybe concerning. Let's send you for a beta test. Sent me for a beta. Betas were low, positive but low. I think at first it was like maybe a perceived miscarriage. So like a miscarriage that hadn't happened yet but was going to happen. I don't know if that's like the real term.
Like a biochemical.
And it's interesting because I remember, because I'm slightly neurotic, I was looking up everything under the sun, and I had looked up ectopic pregnancy, and I had never even actually heard of an ectopic pregnancy. But I had looked up my symptoms, and Google was telling me ectopic pregnancy. And I'm like, this is really strange because my doctor hadn't even sort of proposed that as an idea. It was like, oh, miscarriage, you're probably having a miscarriage.
And we asked.
Yeah, I literally asked.
She said no.
She was like, no. And then I went for an ultrasound.
Yes.
And they did not find. No. So I went to like a community ultrasound center. They didn't find the ectopic. And so I was left for a few weeks just like not understanding what was going on. And that was really tough because not being in control, not understanding, not having any answers. And then my doctor called me after maybe like the third or fourth beta that was continuing to go up, not down, but wasn't doubling. So it was still very low, and said, I'm going to send you to the
early pregnancy
clinic. And she's like, I'll get them to call you. So I'll send in a referral. It was a Thursday. I'll get them to call you, but I think you should go there. And I remember hanging up the phone and I was like, I'm not waiting until these people call me. I think I called maybe 2 or 3 times and nobody picked up the phone. It was kind of during COVID time as well. So I just said, I remember thinking, I'm not waiting. Like, if this is what I think it is, which is an ectopic, nobody else seems to think it's an ectopic. I do. I need to go to I want to know, and I want to go to the hospital. So I went to Mount Sinai ER, emergency room, which is a riveting place, especially during COVID. My husband, Matthew, couldn't come in with me, just, again, because of COVID protocols at the time. And I think like maybe 6 or 7 hours later, we finally got in to see somebody, and they were like, ma'am, I'm really sorry to confirm, but you do have an ectopic. And I was like, yeah, I know. Not to laugh about it because it's not funny, but I sort of was like, yes, I feel like I intuitively understood that this is what was going on. And nobody else seemed to think that's what it was. So they confirmed. I had my first round of methotrexate, which is a pretty heavy duty drug. They stick it in your butt, and it's neon yellow. It's not very nice. And then they sent me home, and I just had to sort of be like, okay, this was the start of the journey. And this had taken weeks to even get to this point, to understand what was going on. So I was told to rest. They told me the threshold is low for you to come back into the ER if you're feeling any sort of pain, because even if you take methotrexate, there's still a risk of rupture. And if you rupture, that becomes quite an emergency and can be
life-threatening.
Yeah, life-threatening. So with that, I'm not going to lie, me and my neurotic self also went to the ER a couple of times, false alarms, was feeling crampy. They would come check me out. They were like, no, ma'am, you're fine. Sent me back home. My betas were being monitored, and they kept going. They didn't go down. I don't think they were going up, but they weren't going down. So at one point they were like, okay, we either need to give you surgery and take a fallopian tube, or you need to do a second round of methotrexate. And I remember at the time thinking like, oh my gosh, like I can't get rid of my fallopian tube. What does this mean for pregnancy? What does this mean for fertility? And like, I have to be honest, I mean, the doctors at Sinai are fantastic. But it's not like there was no like recommendation, which maybe they can't give you a recommendation necessarily, but it wasn't like you should definitely do surgery, or, they really were like, I don't know, it's up to you, methotrexate second round or surgery to remove tube. in hindsight, I sort of wish that I just said remove the tube, just because at that point, like the damage that could have been done. But anyways, hindsight's 2020. I decided to do a second round of methotrexate, and I thought, well, by this point, I've injected myself with so much of this medication, like it's got to work. It's got to terminate this pregnancy. So I was just taking it easy, resting. Matthew got home from work one day and was like, "You don't look good. Like, are you okay?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not, but I've been not okay like for so many weeks at this point. Like, I'm not going to sign IER again." I think at this point we'd been like 4 times. And each time it was like a 12-hour experience because it was just really busy. And so I almost didn't go to the hospital because I was just at that point like exhausted of going and them telling me it's fine, just go back home. So and it was actually Matthew that said, "No, I think we should go." And thank goodness we did, because I got to the hospital and it quickly went from let me, do an ultrasound of your stomach to 30 minutes. I was in the OR, and they were operating and removed my fallopian tube and the pregnancy.
And 2 liters of blood.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, they're very calm, very good. Like, "Ma'am, you have a lot of blood in your abdomen. We're gonna need to go to surgery now."
Yes. Dr. Walker.
Dr. Walker, yeah. So Dr. Walker was my gynecologist. She was so great, especially in that moment when like I was so terrified. I'd never experienced surgery. I obviously my goal was to get pregnant, and now they're like removing a tube. It was terrifying. But she kept me calm and told me I was going to be okay, and had really great bedside manner, which I needed at the time. And yeah, so that was sort of the first big bang. And then they took my tube, so now I'm down a tube.
They noticed some adhesions.
So she came in the morning and she's like, because I had stayed overnight at that point. I think my surgery was, I can't remember what time, but they let me stay overnight. And she came in the morning and said, "So you've got some adhesions on the left side," or I can't remember which side. The right, they removed the right. So they said, "There's definitely some adhesions." And I remember asking her, like, "What does that mean?" Like, I've been looking up a lot about endometriosis. So do you think it's that? She said, "I think, it could be that, but it could also be pelvic inflammatory," sort of gave me the spectrum of things it could be. But for now, focus on, getting better and recovering from surgery. And we'll do some testing once you're recovered. So fast forward to, a couple weeks of recovery. She sent me for a sonohystogram. We looked at my left tube and it was clear. So it was like, okay, I mean, I've only got the one tube and it's clear. So she said, "I think it's okay for you to try naturally. Like, I recommend that." So that was good news. That was the start. I was like, okay, like we can start naturally. I don't even think I was really on the IVF train at this point.
No, you were on the IVF train immediately.
Oh,
you were on the IVF train before you even tried.
You're
You're
right.
like, what is the fastest way to guarantee this?
You know what? I may have at that point been like, "Oh, yeah, you're right. Maybe I was."
100.
Because, the control in me. You're right. But I remember you're right. And then I remember having a conversation with you. I was like, "Should I go to a fertility clinic yet?" And you were like, "No, like, let's just try this naturally.
Doc walk.
Let's just try this naturally." So tried naturally for a few months, started to notice some bloating, and I'd say fatigue were kind of like the two main symptoms. Granted, I was probably more in tune with my body at this point than I'd ever been. Remember coming to you about it. I was like, "I've got this bloating and like something doesn't feel right." So
swollen lymph node in your abdomen.
Right. Oh, yes.
It, pretended I didn't have images of rushing you to the hospital.
You kept me very calm, considering now I knew what you were actually thinking.
Terrified.
Swollen lymph node, bloating, fatigue. So went to the doctor. She sent me for an ultrasound. They're like, "You have a complex cyst on your left ovary." Of course, my left, which is like the ovary I desperately needed to work. The goodie.
Yeah.
The lefty. I know.
I think it's also important to note that your mom had a history of ovarian cancer.
Yes.
So that was also
right
rattling around my brain.
Right.
With your swollen lymph node.
Yes. So that's an important point. When they found the cyst and found that it was complex, there's the complexity that I have ovarian cancer in my family. So, yeah. So that was a little bit terrifying.
No, but you were so calm.
I was
and
at
you
that
were
point.
still like laser focused on pregnancy.
Yeah.
I was like, Kristen, right now we have got to figure out what is going on with your ovary. And you were like, yeah. Like, is it going to make eggs? And I was like, Kristen,
let's refocus.
You're a hypochondriac friend here. And remember me, like, having a nervous breakdown over here?
Yes.
You weren't, though. You were calm.
I was, because I think I was just so, you're right. I was so laser focused on getting pregnant that even at that time I was like, oh, whatever, cyst, it's fine. Like they were, you know, it's fine.
Sista, whatever.
Whatevs, it's fine. But then they said, let's do a follow-up ultrasound. Once they found the cyst, let's do a follow-up ultrasound a couple weeks later. Went back a couple weeks later and the cyst had doubled in size. I think then I was like, oh, wow, Anne, we need to worry about this, not fertility. And you were like, yes. Yes, that's right.
I'd already like started a prayer group for you at that point.
Yeah, you were more scared than I realized. So that, I mean, and in all seriousness, that was terrifying because I went from not feeling in control of fertility to now, oh my gosh, like I have a growing cyst and a history of ovarian cancer in my family. How's this going to pan out? So they sent me for an MRI, and the weeks leading up to the MRI, and of course I can't try. I think at that point I was like, they said like, stop actually trying.
Yes.
So not only was I asked to like pause, you know, on the fertility front, which was devastating news, I was honestly like, holy shit, like I might be dealing with cancer here. And like, that was a whole thing.
You are one of the most positive people though. You were very brave and gracious. And
thank you.
You kept on keeping on.
That's
you were a clear example for me at that point. I still think about it.
Well, I was like a duck, maybe on the surface.
No, maintaining one's head. You were like Winston Churchill.
That's wonderful to know, because inside I didn't feel that way. But no, but you know, there is something to be said about that. You kind of like, it was terrifying, but I also was like, what am I going to do? Like, I have to get through the days somehow, you know? And so I don't even remember how I dealt with it. Like, I think I just focused on whatever I could. I probably picked some other thing to like hyper focus on. Like,
you worked out a lot.
Working out. Yeah. That was probably what I did. So fast forward to the MRI, got the results. They're like, you know, and with MRIs, I guess it's never 100% accurate, but it's pretty darn close. Like if you can get an MRI back and they don't think it's cancer, it's usually, you know, it's the best thing is to actually go in and biopsy something like a cyst. But getting an MRI is sort of the next best thing to, I guess, understand if it's cancerous. So MRI results came back that it was a complex cyst, which we knew, but that there weren't features that they were concerned about for cancer.
No blood flow to it.
No blood flow. Right. No blood flow.
Yeah. I pulled the car over when you called.
Yeah.
I was like, send me the report.
Yeah. No, and that was helpful. I mean, that's been so amazing actually, having like being able to send you all the medical reports.
I think you're going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think that was when you first realized.
Yeah, that's when I was like, oh wow, she was actually quite worried about this, more than she was leading on to be. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But then after that, you started taking even more of a laser focus towards your fertility. And
yeah,
I think because you lost time.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Trying to figure out what was going on with your ovary.
Right.
You wanted to speed things up. And so you went to the fertility center, your first one.
Yes. Yeah. So went to the first fertility center. Lost time was a big one. I know people going through this journey probably feel the same way. Like when you want to get pregnant, it's like you want it yesterday. And so like it's like I was slowed down like maybe a couple months for all of this, but still those were the longest months, you know, and I just don't want to lose sight of that. Cause it sucks. Like those months suck, but I don't know, you find a way to get through it. And then my thing was always having like a next step or a next plan. I needed like you know what I mean? I think even with you, we would be like, okay, what's the next like supplement I'm going to take, or what's the next, I just needed to know that there was one next step, and then that was my plan. And as long as I had some sort of plan, that's what would get me through. Yeah. So then I went to my first fertility clinic. At this point, I had done a lot of research on endometriosis. And I mean, my own research. And then I think you and I had talked about it too. And I remember, there was a few days I'd leave here being like, do I have it? And I think you were you were sort of on the fence too. Like, it was kind of like, maybe I never had bad periods or anything like that. So there was no major warning signs that I was just like this classic endo patient per se. But like
your MRI was telling.
Yeah. So that was, I think, more when we were like, I'm pretty sure, like, nobody's telling me I have endo, but like, pretty sure that sounds like the case.
So we wanted to make sure that with your fertility, that you were able to go to a clinic that was going to take that into consideration.
Right.
Because, I mean, you were a good sport, but I'm always really hyper-focused on how endometriosis affects the immune system and creates immune dysfunction, which can then lead to a lack of transfer success. Right. And so your original plan to go to this first clinic you were so ready and like so well educated on what to expect. And I feel like you walked in there as like an ideal patient. Like, you were so well researched already. And I feel like a lot of that was shut down upon your arrival.
Yes. You're just teeing them up for me. Yeah. I mean, so I got to that first clinic. I have to say, like, I'm sure people can relate to this going through fertility. It's like, I actually was like I was like excited to go through IVF in the beginning.
Oh, I know.
Because I was like, this is something I can control. Like, there's dates and there's appointments and there's monitoring. Like, I felt this insane.
You're like, this is a guarantee.
It was like, yeah. It was, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I finally, for the first time in a long time in that journey, because by this point it had been about a year by the time, like, ectopic and trying naturally and yada yada yada. So I went to this RE and talked to them about cysts, talked to them about endo. I was essentially told, like, we're not sure if you have endo, so we're not going to treat you like you have endo. So, because there's no signs pointing to the fact that you have endo necessarily. We don't know that. So we can't treat you like somebody with endo. And then the other thing was, of course, your favorite topic. They tested my AMH, which I think was 12, not to like throw numbers out there. And I remember her being like diminished ovarian reserve 12. So like, I think we gotta go straight to IVF.
Just for those of you who are listening, that's not diminished ovarian reserve. just in case you two have 12 AMH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and actually it fluctuated between like a few tests. Now that I think about it, there was 12 and then 9 and then 11. Like, there was a couple tests, but it was around that. And then I was told diminished ovarian reserve, your best bet's IVF. So she created a protocol. I'll say that I didn't vibe with the RE in the beginning, which I realize now was important. But at the time, you're like, I'm at the mercy of all of this. So like, I'll just, whatever, it's fine. Like, if, she just wasn't, I just didn't vibe with her. And that's fine. I think that happens in the medical community, and it is what it is. But
she was just very like cookie cutter. She didn't take any of your extremely complex previous history into consideration. And the fact that like you were clearly inflamed and had been for over a year.
Right.
And that's known to diminish AMH, and it's known to increase FSH. And none of that was taken into consideration or explained to you. And you were given the same protocol as the majority of the patients that I see on a regular basis coming out of this clinic from that same RE. And there was no individualization. And you had I'm protective specifically over you because you've been a good friend of mine for now 10 years.
Yeah.
So I was more heated, I think, to see like what is happening with this protocol. Like, this isn't appropriate at all. But at that point, you were so confused by what you should be doing and who you should be listening to.
to speak to the confusion that I'm sure many of us feel, it's like I've got Anne who like cares so much about fertility, and I knew like genuinely cared about me, and I'm like, I want to listen to this. And then I have an RE because I went to her and I said, I'm concerned about this protocol because you had said you were concerned about the protocol. I gave her the reasons why, which were I have a cyst, and what if it grows with the amount of, hormones that we have? I think I have endometriosis, but we're not sure, but I might. And again, I think the protocol, the meds seem high. And it was just like, nope, this is the protocol you're going to get. There wasn't a lot of sort of budging on that. And it was confusing for me because I was like, who do I listen to? I want to listen to you. I have this RE telling me, and it was really hard. And I did listen to her, went through with the IVF process and didn't get the results that we wanted. And I'm sure that happens a lot with many patients, right? That
also made you really ill.
Yes, I'm pretty sure I had, what do you call it?
OHSS.
SS, yeah. So went through the process again. Like in the beginning, I was almost excited about it. Weirdly, who's excited about injecting needles in themselves? But like I was like, there's a time and a place, and I get to do it, and blah blah. Went through all of that time, making my body feel awful. The money to do it is not, something to be ignored. And then so I think I got 12 eggs, 4 embryos that went to blast. And I remember thinking like, okay, like this is good. 4 embryos. We're doing great. Sent them off for PGTA testing, and we did get one back, but we're told that it was like basically shit quality. Wasn't going to like, it was higher like, miscarriage rate.
Based on nothing, because it was still like a tested euploid embryo. Like day 7 doesn't really matter in terms of that much of a percentage difference of a live birth.
Right. But it was kind of like, you're going to have to do more of this. And I think in that moment, I was like, what do you mean? I thought I was just going to be done, and you hear it all the time. It's with IVF, it can often take more than one round to yield the results that you want, but you just don't want that to be you. So I was like, I think I had my hopes way higher than they maybe should have been, and I was really disappointed with the results because we want, more than one kid, and we're sort of told this embryo was meh, and like of the 4 embryo, like I was thinking like, okay, of the 4, I thought I'd at least get 2 based on like general fertility math principles, but yeah, we were pretty gutted after that first round. And look, there's so many situations too where I know people don't get any embryos or what, like, so it's like we were lucky, I'm saying, like in some ways, but it was not what we were expecting after having gone through all of this. And by this point now, I'm like, I have this like proverbial clock ticking in my back and in my head going like, you're running out of time. You're running out of time.
Right.
That's the anxiety settling in. And I have friends getting pregnant at this point who maybe weren't even talking about having kids at, when I started trying to get pregnant. Like it's just every reminder of like, I'm behind, I'm running behind. Like I think I probably have cried to you telling you this, like at some point in the journey being like, Anne, I'm running out of time. And you're like, you're still youthful.
Yeah. It's tough though, right? Because like from a biological standpoint, I think I take a different approach. Like from a biological standpoint, I think that you're more than capable and you have so much time.
Mm-hmm.
But from like an emotional standpoint, you're running out of the patience to keep going and to hold it together. Like at this point, you were still holding it together, and I feel like you felt yourself fraying. You were becoming a person that you didn't really recognize.
Mm-hmm.
I remember on one of our walks, you were upset because you were feeling less than enthused about finding out someone else was pregnant, and that just was not you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that happens all the time. Like every single patient that has ever come here has had a moment in time where they were like, look, my sister's pregnant and I have to throw the baby shower and I don't want to.
Yeah.
Or like I found out, like I had a new patient on Tuesday who cried when she told me that her sister was pregnant. And she was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I'm so excited for her. But it's not that. It's just the reminder of your own current existence and how much you would like for that to be you.
Yeah.
As opposed to you wishing poorly upon somebody else. But even then, you were very hard on yourself. And I think you were starting to fray. And so you, in a sense, you were running out of time in the timeline of like, how much emotional fortitude do I still have to keep going and to still continue going to work and being a good wife, being a good friend, and doing all of the things that are supposed to help with my fertility, when ultimately it's like it's not paying off. Time felt cruel at this point because you were losing so much of it, but you were putting so much into it.
I remember at that point, I had spoken to the same RE and I said, okay, so if we were going to do this again, like, what does that look like? And she said, nothing, like the same. We're going to do the same protocol. And I was like, okay, but like we did this and it didn't work. And she's like, and she explained to me, and there's probably some truth to this, that like sometimes you could do the same protocol and yield completely different results. It can be different, every time. But I think I knew in that moment, like I need to change something here. I need to change something here.
You were also like, your cyst had grown.
Right. And I think we knew that at that point.
And you were feeling awful.
Swollen like I feel now, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were feeling so off.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, like, is this normal? Like, is this what happens after IVF?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to freak you out, but I was like, I mean, people feel unwell, but like at this point you had like swollen, your legs were swollen.
Yeah. I was having some
There was like
swelling.
pitting edema in your ankles.
My knees.
And your knees.
Yeah.
I was like, this needs to be addressed. And I think it scared me too, because at this particular clinic, I had another patient who had gone in with a uterine tumor, and it was, diagnosed as just a fibroid, and she had done a round of IVF and it had grown, and they ignored it. And then she started hemorrhaging. She went into her gynecologist's office to discuss this fibroid. And once he found out that they had done a round of IVF and it had grown and that she was hemorrhaging, he was furious. And this gynecologist, Dr. Ali Murji, he's amazing, is a very level-headed fellow. And he flat out told this particular patient, like, you are not to do any more IVF. You are not going back into the clinic. This is absolutely unacceptable. And she had to be cared for. She's currently being cared for the same complications.
Really?
So at that instance, have that narrative running through the back of my head, and then seeing that you're not being addressed and that the same cyst is now grown and now you have other symptoms.
Right.
Like, for no physician to be taking this into consideration when you're under medical care was horrifying. Well, especially because you were still focused on just getting pregnant.
Right. Right. Like, I mean,
hello? Is anyone paying attention to what's going on?
Yeah.
But you were like, I'm jealous of your baby because you put yourself aside so many times through this journey. I got a microscopic view of what's going on here, but I was genuinely stunned. I think at that point I forbade you from going back.
At that point I think I had no choice. But in all seriousness, I was like, I knew, and this was big for me because again, I had my focus. Being totally honest, I tend to run on the people pleasing side. So I was like, oh, I don't want to like ruffle any feathers with the clinic. Meanwhile, ruffle feathers with the clinic. Like, why am I worried about that? But these are the things that went through my head. But you know what? I remember talking to Matthew and I was like, something's got to change. We got to change something up. I can't go back and do another round of IVF with the same thing and, with the same protocol. Anne's telling me, and actually, this is a very important point that I should have said earlier. Prior to doing IVF, your concern was the cyst. And you said to me, sometimes, and having had a cyst yourself, dermoid? A dermoid cyst?
Yeah, teratoma.
Yeah.
Cutie.
Yeah, derms. You had said to me, sometimes it's best to just get things out of you that aren't serving you. And you said this before doing IVF. You never said like, Kristen, you should get surgery to get this out. You weren't pushy in that way at all. You were just like, think like something to think about. And then of course I was like, okay, thought about it. And then I was like, but IVF. So I went for IVF. And then I remember sort of thinking back to you saying that and then revisiting it and thinking to myself, like, I do wonder like how much that cyst impacted my results. You were also in parallel worried that yes, impacting results, but more importantly, like the cyst is impacting you, like you have symptoms, which I was less worried about, probably should have been more worried about.
Yeah.
But there was all these elements that just pointed me into change something up. So
even like if we're looking at results,
yeah,
like impacting the quality of all of the eggs coming from that left ovary.
Right.
Like it was a massive cyst.
Yeah.
Like blood flow is obviously going to be compromised.
Right. But nobody said this to me, right? Like everyone's like, no, it's fine. It doesn't have an impact, right? It's more dangerous to get it out is what they told me, right? Because it could scar your ovary. And there's probably some truth to that too. It's risky to be able to get a cyst out. Cause I remember asking like, should I get this out before doing IVF? And they were like, I don't think that you should because it could impact your ovary. Meanwhile, again, not like spoiler alert, but I think it was the other way around. This was impacting my eggs. So we switched clinics, which was a big move, at least for me, because as I said, I don't like to ruffle feathers. I was like, set up at this one clinic. It meant, time to get into the next clinic. So again, had to like push it all back, which just kept, again, the ticking. It's like this ticking clock.
I was proud of you though. That was a big move for you.
It was. Thank you.
Switch.
It was a big one.
You also were very cute about it. I don't know if you remember this. That you on one Sunday went for a drive with Matthew to the new clinic.
Oh, we did.
So that you could map out your routine and prepare.
Yes. So I'm really happy you reminded me of this. Oh my God, he's literally kicking my belly is. Sorry.
No,
I just gave another spoiler alert, but so the new clinic was in Markham. And I mean, that's not close to where we live. It's not convenient. But at this point we were like, whatever, like we got to just do what we got to do. Like we've heard really good things about this clinic. And so one Sunday literally toured around, drove by the clinic and we're like, okay, this is the drive. Was this doable? It's doable. As long as we leave early, we got this. Our 407 bill is going to be a little bit scary, but that's okay. It's worth it.
Drop in the bucket for IVF.
I mean, yeah, in this grand scheme of things, you're right. So we finally got into Markham. I immediately felt better when I met the new RE that I worked with. Can I say who I worked with?
Please, I love her.
Okay, yeah. So Dr. Chan, who just I realized then, like, at least for me, like having an RE that you feel like you can talk to, that's listening to you, that you trust is actually like, it's really important. And I was brushing it off in the beginning, but I didn't feel that way at the first clinic. It's really important. And so I met with this fabulous Dr. Chan. She listened. We talked about the endo. We talked about the cyst. She set me up for some testing. And it was actually her that said, I know you've had an MRI, but at this point that was several months ago. And I don't feel comfortable putting you through another round of IVF before we go get another MRI. And I remember thinking like, gee, wait. I mean, I loved her at the time, but I was also like, another setback. Like, what do you mean another MRI? Because you got to order the MRI, then you got to get into. But she was now again concerned about the cyst. And I remember asking like, what are you concerned about? And she said, well, there's sort of two things this could be based on the features of the cyst. It could be an endometrioma, which I was actually like, finally, the first person that has acknowledged that like I maybe have endometriosis other than me and Anne. And
What a club.
you and I were just like club of two. And or she's like, with your history, like it could be cancer. She was so good about, I don't remember leaving that conversation thinking like, oh God, I have cancer. But she was like, I need to be sure. So let's make sure that we, get this checked out. So at this point, I remember going home being like, okay, we have to get this MRI. But then again, I'm hearing your voice from like, I don't know, 9 months prior. And I'm like, maybe I should just like, if an MRI is never going to be 100% confirming that I have cancer and I'm feeling like crap and all of these things. And you and I had talked about this at length, and you were very good about balancing, not being like, this is what you must do. Like you were close, but you never actually like pushed, you never like forced me with anything. I thought, you know what? Instead of getting an MRI, like, let's just figure out how to get this thing out. And like, I have never, and I'm sometimes with anxiety, you get sort of like, I'm sure people can relate to this. Like, it's so hard to make decisions sometimes because you second guess your own decisions. It was the funniest thing because all of a sudden, once I said it out loud, I was like, this is the right move. I've never been so sure of something in my life. It was so bizarre. I was like, yep, I'm supposed to get this cyst out. Something's telling me I got to get this cyst out. So we got in touch with a very skilled doctor at Humber River Hospital. And a gynecologist who specializes in this. And we got a surgery date booked. So keep in mind, this is now another setback, right? So I'm like, I got the clock ticking, but I'm like, this is the right thing. I need to do this. And we waited and then got the surgery to remove the cyst. And the goal with Dr. Chan was, okay, you go do that. And, she wasn't necessarily saying one way or another either. She was just saying, let's get the MRI. But when I told her, she was very supportive when I said, I think I'd like to get the cyst out first. And she said, you know what? Totally get it. Like, you go do that. I'm going to,
also
come back to me.
So that you could use an adjunct that we were hoping you could in order, I'm now ruining things, but you couldn't use Sizon.
Right.
If you were going to
be
concerned about a mass
yes,
on your ovary.
Yes. Thank you for the
No
other
problem.
tea. So we get the cyst out. That was a whole experience. I was off, work for 6 weeks.
The summer of Kristen.
Yeah. I guess I'll use this as an inflection point just to share, like, for anybody else who's been through this as well. I'm sure you relate. It's like, you go through all of this and like, thankfully I have a supportive workplace because like, you're going through all this IVF. I have all these surgeries I had to go on to. So the ectopic, I was on leave for a few weeks. This, I had to be off work for 6 weeks. And it's like, I'm also trying to like grow my career. So it's like, I don't want to like lose sight of that. Like that was like a huge element. I was like, okay, I just got to be off work for another 6 weeks. And I would have done it again. Like I had to prioritize that, but it was just, I just wanted to make that point because it's not easy when you're going through this stuff. So healed from that, Dr. Chan and I met again to think about protocol for IVF Round Two, which of course I was like, when is the first date you can get me in? And she was like, well, let's make sure you're healed first. So we looked into a protocol. You had told me about Sizan. You were like, I really want you to ask about Sizan. And I was like, okay. And the best part is I went to Dr. Chan and was like, Dr. Chan, Anne has suggested that I ask about Sizan. She's like, oh, Anne. Like she like knew who Anne was. And she was like, obviously it wasn't the first time that she's been,
Just a casual suggest. I
Yes.
throw them in there. Sometimes she'll catch it and sometimes she'll lob it back.
But she knew. She's like,
try.
the Anne suggestion. I see. So we changed up the protocol from my first round of IVF, which felt good. I was like, okay, we've like got the cyst removed. We've changed the protocol. We added Sizan, and
you were like working out and eating like a lunatic.
Oh my God. I went on this like wild diet because I was like, and then I started, because
no
I think because I had
coffee.
time off, I was like looking into all of these, again, not bad things, like all like non-toxic. If anybody's gone down the non-toxic train, let me tell you, if you have time to focus on that, it is like you can get in a deep hole. I was in a deep hole of like, I
I
can't even just go outside because I'll
literally
breathe in
was
this
like,
air.
can you walk with me? Is that
It's like,
okay?
yeah, it was
I was
intense.
drinking like a venti double shot coffee and you were like, just water for me.
Oh my God, yeah. I gave up coffee and like that was probably the most devastating.
Squeeze of lemon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
It
Too
was
many
not
glass cups. Like
I only drink out of
ma'am.
glass. I only drink out of glass. No, I went on a whole, but again, it was that needing to focus, needing to control, needing to like feel like I was doing everything in my power possible to make sure this worked. Because I was like, I can't go through another setback. I just can't. Like I know that Matthew and I are supposed to be parents. I know we are. So like this needs to work. And I focused on that and I just didn't keep my eye off the ball. And we went into IVF round 2, about 8 weeks after my surgery last summer.
You were both taking a zillion supplements too.
A zillion.
Yeah, that was impressive.
A lot of supplements.
That was impressive.
Yeah. We were just supplements, water,
even
salmon.
For me, I was like, if you want, we can throw this in. You were like, whatever.
I'm like, Anne, I did this research and I think I need this supplement. And you're like, I was telling you the supplements I needed to add to my protocol. You were like, you've officially lost it, but
I was supportive.
But you were supportive.
As I gagged at the thought
of taking that many pills. I know.
But you did
for
it.
IVF. And here's the cool thing. So we went in, did it. It was definitely, it felt better that time. So I obviously didn't get any like major, I mean, so I could tell the difference doing IVF without a giant cyst. Let me tell you that. A 7-centimeter cyst, to be clear, like not small. And so that was gone. We went through the process. Clinic was so amazing, really. Like every person that I encountered at that clinic was so kind and wonderful.
You did a different priming too.
That's right.
If you're comfortable speaking about that, just because I feel like a lot of people.
Do you remember it?
Yeah, you did like an androgel prime.
Androgel prime. I don't think I did very much estrogen.
No, you didn't.
Because endo.
And also, yeah, like your FSH wasn't obscenely high, so there was no need.
Right.
For that.
I also forgot one very important part of the story, and I need to go back. When they removed the cyst and biopsied the cyst, they confirmed it was an endometrioma, which I was like, what we've been saying all along. Sorry, I needed to say that. Having a confirmed endo diagnosis, it's a very strange thing because you'd never think you'd be excited to be confirmed for a diagnosis, but like I actually was like, thank you. I like somebody finally, like we finally know what is happening. And like I think I intuitively knew, but it was nice to get the like confirmed, the cyst is endo.
Yes.
And when they took out the cyst, it was actually attached to my ureter and my bowel. So like no wonder I was experiencing so much discomfort. And there was some other pockets of endo. It wasn't like crazy endo, but it was like enough that like it was present. So anyways, just wanted to confirm that. So then the protocol that we did was with the understanding that I had endo, which was obviously a better protocol.
And actually took it into consideration, which a lot of clinics don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's a common narrative that REs will say that whether you have endo or you don't have endo, it doesn't really impact what we're going to do anyway. Yeah. Which is insane. Like looking at not only the journals, but your patient experience.
Right. Right. And how you're going to feel going through this. Like, I think we got 21 eggs. We started off a little better. Actually, quite a bit better.
A lot better.
And trying to remember. So 5 made it to blast. I don't remember the numbers in between because there's all the math in between. But 5 made it to blast. Now remember, 4 made it to blast for me last time. So I'm like, okay, 5 made it to blast. Like,
no, you were not happy.
I was like, yeah, that's
you were
fine.
Not okay.
And you're like, Kristen, this isn't that, like, this is actually pretty good.
You were already like planning for round number 3. I was like, time out.
Yeah. Well, and that's how you get at that point, right? Like you've been through it. You've been through all these rounds. And I'm like, so in my head, I had set up in the plan, because I always have to have a plan, that like, I'm probably going to have to do another couple rounds of this. And like I was thinking like, I'll probably have to do like 4 rounds of IVF. So I was like already preparing that in my head.
I know. We went on a walk. Yeah. You remember the walk the day you got the call about your blasts?
Yeah.
We went on a walk on the day that you were waiting for Markham to call you.
Yeah.
And you were telling me your next plan because the grading of these embryos you were so distressed by.
Right.
You're like, they're bad. They're ugly. They're not going to be good embryos.
Yeah.
I just know it. This is going to be the same.
Yeah, that's right. Because I had the grading. You're right.
Yeah, you were going
grading,
to
and
some
I was
picnic or something after.
Yeah.
We were marching around Oakville.
Right. Right.
And you were so determined that this was going to not work out.
Yeah. Yeah, you really do start to set yourself up because you're like, well, I mean, like, these are the results I've had so far. So, yeah. So we got the 5, but, you know, there were moments I was like, okay, maybe 1 or 2 will come back, you know, maybe 1 or 2. And then, you know, maybe we'll just do 1 more round. But like, I was mentally prepared to do at least another 2 rounds of IVF. So they send them off for PGTA testing. And it's like the longest 3 weeks of your life in between when like they send them off and when you get the results. And I'll never forget, it was right before Labor Day weekend. We had plans to go to my best friend's cottage with like a bunch of my like super close friends, like people that I'd want to be around getting either news. And I get the call from the genetic counselor and she's like, all 5 are euploid. All 5 are coming back. And like, I have chills even like saying it. Like, I actually think that moment was just as exciting as when, you know, further down the road when we got that positive. Like, I was not expecting it. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I thought she was I'm like, are you sure? Can you check the results one more time? Like, are you sure? But yeah, all 5 came back, all euploid. And I was like in shock. I was like, what now? So that was awesome. Had a great Labor Day weekend with my friends because I was just like, okay, like I don't have to do like, or at least I don't think I'll have to do 5 more rounds of IVF, right? Like, I mean, I've got enough embryos. I feel comfortable at this point transferring as a next step versus doing more rounds as a next step. So that was huge. It was finally good news. And I basically at this point had not had a moment yet where there was really any good news other than, of course, we don't think you have cancer, but other than that,
aside from your benign mass,
aside from the benign mass, which was a very important point.
You were laser focused.
I had my eye on the prize.
You were ready. I
was ready. So then we planned for transfer. And of course, you also had some suggestions there.
Thank you, Dr. Chan, for listening.
At one point, I'm like, can I just put the 2 of you in touch? Can I just set up a conference call?
She was very agreeable.
No, she was. And that was the best part, is sort of working together with you both. Like, it was like, even if she let me sort of, I said, I'd feel more comfortable doing this. And she said, that's totally fine. Let's do that. So I did intralipid treatment, was one of the things that I did that you had recommended.
Right. Because of the way that endo can cause dysregulation of the immune system.
Right. And it acts like kind of an autoimmune. So I guess if you have autoimmune, you would typically do that.
It increases NK cells. And so the way to ensure that isn't problematic in a transfer scenario is to advocate for intralipids.
Okay.
It's very interesting because there's a lot of research suggesting that it is beneficial, but I feel like that's brushed aside. And so even in cases where you have unexplained infertility, if you're going into a transfer scenario, I would advocate for using intralipids because unless you have like a soy or egg allergy, like known anaphylactic, like there's no reason to not include it.
Right.
Because if it lowers your NK cells and they're elevated, then that could be the difference. And if it doesn't do anything, then it doesn't do anything.
Right.
It's not like there's a negative side effect, which I find so strange that some clinics are willing to put patients on like prednisone for extended periods of time at a high dose where there is actual potential complication.
Right.
But they're not willing to do something as simple as like intralipids.
Which was easy. I mean, I went there and I think I like logged onto my work computer while I was getting it done. It's like 3-hour, experience.
IV,
it was pretty an IV. Yeah. So,
of course you did. Kristen, you're the best.
Multitasking.
Most people are like, and I just watched a show for 3 hours. You're logging in.
Yeah, I logged into work.
Working
I was
away?
like, I can be productive while doing this. This is like, what do they call it? Habit stacking, you know?
Dead. A common habit stack. Get your intralipids while you work.
Yeah, exactly.
Modulate that immune system.
Yeah.
Ready.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so we're almost there. And so basically, you know, we get ready for the transfer, do the intralipids. We do the transfer. Now, even with the transfer, I was like, okay, like I know that this may not, this may not work and that's going to be okay. We've got these other embryos though, so like, we've got a bit of a bank. So, but I remember mentally preparing that this may not work. I was being very realistic about the fact that, this may not work. They did the transfer, which is like so painless compared to everything else that you go through with IVF.
Especially because you did like a natural transfer.
Oh yes, I did a natural. So yeah, the protocol was modified natural, I think it's called.
No, you just did a natural.
Yeah.
So most patients now, you're actually one of the only patients I have that ever did just a natural transfer where you didn't do any stems. You just waited for your own ovulation.
Yes, yeah.
And then 6 days later did the transfer.
That's right.
But your ovaries were misbehaving and you were like, why aren't you ovulating? This is the longest cycle of my life.
Yes, it took a long time. So that was
like, I think you might be stressed.
I forgot about that. You're right. It took long. Of course, I was like, of course it takes longer. Like, and I was like, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. But then they transferred it and it was all good. And I'll never forget this. So then I did go on progesterone shots, which are gnarly shots in your butt, very gnarly shots. And so I had to do those shots. And they did tell me like, you may not feel great from the progesterone. So I think it was like a few days in, maybe like day 4 post transfer. And no, day 6. I don't know. I can't remember. I came in here. I told you she has a way better memory than me. You know my story better than I do.
Well, yeah, I was so ecstatic because I was like, did you test?
Okay, so this is the best part. Anne's like, did you take a pregnancy test? Which, I mean, is on brand for me to want to just, know. But I also was told by the clinic that you were to go at, 9 or 10 days. I can't remember the day. And we'll do a beta. And they actually said, don't test with a pregnancy test before then. Or you can, but like, we don't recommend it.
You hadn't done trigger though, so.
Yeah. So I was like,
what's the harm?
I came to see you and I was like, I feel hungover. I was like, I feel like I'm having a bad hangover and I'm just not feeling great. And like these progesterone, and it was literally like, these progesterone shots really have me. And you were like, Kristen, I think you're feeling this way because you're pregnant. And I was like, Anne, like, you don't know this. And you were like, I think you need to go home and take a test. And I was like, they told me not to do that. I couldn't do such a thing. But anyways, I listened to you. I went home and I was
like, you're practically, you're 10 days post-op at this point. Let's go.
So, and you know what? I'm so happy that I did that because we actually got that like pregnancy test moment, which like, look, when you're going through all of this, there's none of the like movie moments. So I was like, if I could just have one of those things, so like to be able to go take a test, Matthew and I got to like see the positive test and it was like so beautiful. It was like such a nice moment. And to be able to have that was like really special. Otherwise it would have been, your nurse calls you and then I'm running downstairs to tell Matthew. So that was cool. Then I was just pregnant and I was like almost in shock.
Then I was just pregnant.
Then I was just pregnant.
Still are.
So that's
sitting here all pregnant.
That's where we are today.
With no cyst.
Sans cyst.
/ endometrioma.
Down a tube.
God.
But up a baby.
Down a tube, but up a baby.
Yeah.
God, if I didn't have such an important question for you, that would have been such a good mic drop moment.
I know. Okay, so what's the important question?
What would you say is your most important takeaway? What did you learn? I really need to emphasize that, honestly, I've acted like I was Kristen's like big sister since 2014. So this weird dynamic that you're watching, I apologize. But she's like more of a sister to me than Jane. And I can say that because Jane's not going to listen to this.
Oh my God, Jane.
You would.
It's hard to pick one thing. So can I say like more than one thing?
Yeah, please. As many as you'd like.
I think the biggest thing was like learning how to cope with not being able to be in control and learning how to like actually just live life while you're in that state. So like I really had to like that was a real effort for me. Like how do you get through the day without only thinking about how you can get pregnant or, you know, because there were so many days that took over. And so I think that realization that like you can do that, you have to work at it, but it's important. You can't control things in life. There's a lot you can't control. And you got to kind of ride the wave. And it sucks sometimes, but it's important. That was a big lesson for me as somebody that's a control freak that gets anxious sometimes. So that was a big lesson. This is going to sound cheesy, but I have to say it. Like I realized, and I mean, I knew this before too, but like I really did realize like the team and the community that you have around you is so important. And that was like everything from, you know, making sure that I was comfortable with my medical team, having you obviously like was like truly my lifesaver to even just talk through stuff and be like, this is what's going on, and you to give me, you know, your perspective, having the right community around you, both from a medical perspective, but then also friends and family. Like most of my friends actually were not going through something similar. And yet, and that was hard sometimes, but for the most part, like everyone was so supportive of me, like so cheerleading. So like I believe in this for you guys. Like, and that really did help. Like, I'm like, it's so little, but like that meant so much. Like, I'll never forget my one friend was like, hey, I don't know much about IVF. So I went home and like looked it up and, you know, this is what I learned. And I was like, that, like I could cry. I was like, that was so kind. Right. So surrounding yourself with that community of people, that can support you, is really helpful in these moments as well. I'm sure there's like 8 things that I'm going to regret not saying, but those are the top 3 I can think of right now.
You know, what's so funny is actually one of the things I'll say about you that anyone who knows you will agree, but you are the most thoughtful and like joyful, like truly joyful for other people's success and happiness. And so I think everybody's so excited to have that same excitement and joy for you because you give it so freely. And one of the, I don't know if you remember, like one of my first patients for fertility back in 2016 in my first location was your friend who had just had a miscarriage.
That's right.
And you told her, hey, like, I think I have someone that can help you. And you brought her to me and you were like, I have no interest in having children right now, but if you could help my friend, that would be great.
I don't know what you do. I'm not even sure I really understand what acupuncture is for. I see you for it all the time, but I don't really know why I'm coming here. But yeah. I think you could help my friend.
Yeah, yeah. Sincerely. And so your friend came for fertility, and then your friend is now one of the first people who's, you know, liking and so thrilled about the news that you're posting.
Yeah.
It's just such an interesting, like, full circle moment.
I have the bestest friends, I have to say. Not to brag, but I really do have the bestest friends. They're the best.
You only have as good of a friend as you are.
Well, it's very kind. Very kind.
It's true.
Aw, thanks so much.
Oh my. We're having one of those podcast moments where you're listening to the podcast and you're like, okay.
Okay.
Get over yourselves, guys. We get it. You love each other.
We do love each other.
So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for listening. Thank you all for listening. I hope, please reach out to me or reach out to Anne to figure out how to reach out to me because if it's helpful in any way, I like want to help people because I just know that stories were helpful to me when I was struggling. And I mean that. I'm not just like saying that because I'm on a podcast. Like I really do mean that.
You've already spoken to a few of my patients. Where I'm like, if you could talk to my friend, she'll make you feel better about your current journey.
Listen, I may not be able to solve things, but I'm here to listen.
Talk about size and
here to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for listening this week. Every time that you listen, you share, you rate, you review, it helps boost our show, which not only gives me the motivation to carry forth, but also helps attract new guests with new information. So thank you so much. Please don't forget, again, rate, review, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll talk to you soon on the next episode.